Bon dia, Eva Cordia. Hello, everybody. Eimear here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat 146, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And as is customary, I start with the prayer for peace. Gomara Shiacon, ar fud na crinne. Gomara Shiacon, in our Jaili agus in our Jirha. Gonairi Lin, Len ar Cuid Garmacha, Gamwich Buichas Jeev, Jeha Chivdaka, is Spirit Chivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So you will see that this is not a live recording. I am not able to do one this evening, so I decided I would record a story for you. But first, Banathina Bialtana Jivsha. Bialtana, blessings to you all. Here in Ireland, Bialtana lasts a month. In fact, it means the month of A. So the title of the story is Old May Night. So I thought it is in keeping with the month that's in it. Let me begin. Irish people are obsessed with the weather. We talk about it all the time. Whinge, whine, complain. It's either too hot, too cold, etc. This has been the wettest spring. The winter has been the mildest winter. Last July was the wettest July in recorded history. June was the hottest June in recorded history. But this has been going on for years and years and years. Now, the coldest night ever in Ireland was Iwa, the Siwad, Chanamshire, long, long ago in ancient times, and that was known as Old May Night. In fact, the 11th of May, and we're soon coming up to its anniversary. The coldest, bitterest night ever in Ireland. Old May Night. Now, hundreds of years later, the old Hog of Achill was still alive at the time. There was another viciously bitter cold night. Cold would cut through you. And the poor old Hog of Achill was worried. He didn't think he'd survive the night because it was so cold. Anyway, he flew into a nearby woods and hovered around to see how he might find some kind of shelter for the night. And then he spied up on the highest tree in the woods a nest. He thought, great, I'll be safe so. And up he flew. And it so happened that it was an eagle's nest. Now, inside the nest was a fledgling. So he hopped into the nest, picked the fledgling up in his beak, flew out, killed the fledgling, and threw it away. Flew as quickly as he could back in to the nest and hunkered down to get himself a bit warm. Now, luckily, it was getting a bit dark. And who arrives? Only the mother eagle. So she couldn't see very clearly who it was that was in the nest. And in her beak was a huge piece of succulent meat that she intended to feed who she thought was her child. So she fed tasty morsels of meat, bit by bit, to the old Hog of Achill. And I'm telling you, he ate every morsel with relish. And when he'd finished eating, she sat down on top of him to keep him warm for the night. Now, as I said, it was a bitterly cold night. And the mother eagle was up and down, trying to keep herself and her child warm. And she did nothing but complain. Oh, I'm perished with the cold. It's going right through my feathers into my very bones. I have never, ever in all my life experienced a night as cold as this. And this went on and on all night. And dawn was coming, and the old hawk was terrified that she'd recognise that it wasn't her son that was in the nest, but the old hawk himself. Fortunately for him, she didn't notice because she was complaining so much. Eventually, the old hawk said, "Well, yes, indeed, it was a cold night last night. But you know, there was a night that was colder than this." And his mother looks. Well, not his mother, the eagle looks at him and says, "Well, how would you know? You're only a month out of your shell." And he said, "I'm telling you, there was a night that was colder than this. It was known as Old May Night." "I don't believe you," said the mother eagle. "Well, if you don't believe me, go and find the blackbird at the forge, and she'll tell you." Now, she wasn't one bit happy. She was tired, cold, and hadn't slept. But off she flew in a huff, and she didn't stop flying until she arrived at the forge. And inside she saw the blackbird, who was perched up on an iron rod. "Are you the blackbird at the forge?" "Indeed I am." "Well, let me tell you why I'm here. I have a young fella, and he's only a month out of the shell. And I have spent the coldest night ever. I was up and down on my nest, trying to keep my child and myself warm, with the cold coming through my feathers and perishing me to the core. I have never experienced a night as cold as this. And my young fella, a month out of the shell, and he tells me last night was not the coldest night, that there was another night that was colder. I don't believe him, but he told me to find you." "Well," said the blackbird at the forge, "I came here when I was very young, when this rod, iron rod on which I'm standing, was so many inches long and so many inches wide. And every 7 years I'd rub my beak on this iron rod. If I do it one more time, it'll break. Now that'll tell you how long I've been in this forge. And as sure as I'm standing on this iron rod, I have never, ever felt a night that was colder than last night. But I know I can't help you, but somebody might help you. It's find a stag in a certain field. If there's anyone that's going to help you, it'll be him." So the mother eagle thanked the blackbird at the forge, and off she flew. And she didn't stop flying until she found that certain stag in a certain field. And there he was standing, and she said, "You are the stag." "Indeed I am." "Well, let me tell you why I'm here. I have a young fledgling. He's only 1 month out of the shell. And last night was the coldest night I ever spent. In my life, I spent the whole night up and down on my nest trying to keep myself and my child warm, with that cold going through my feathers, right through my very bones. And I'm telling you, I never had a night as cold as last night. But my young fella tells me this morning that there was a night that was colder than last night. So he sent me to the blackbird at the forge. She tells me she's never experienced a night as cold as last night, and she sent me to you." "Well," he said, "I've been here thousands of years, and every year I lose my antlers, and I've created a fence around this field. And all I have to do is lose these two, and I will have completed the fence. And that'll tell you how long I've been here. And as sure as I'm standing in this field, surrounded by these antlers, I have never experienced a night as cold as last night. But there is one who is older than I am, and that is the blind salmon of Assaroe. Find her, and she might give you some account of this situation." And the eagle says, "Well, where can I find her?" "Well, you'll find her in the river Erne." So the eagle mother thanked the stag, and she set off flying. And she didn't stop flying until she arrived at the river Erne. And she found the place where she saw the blind salmon of Assaroe swimming. "Are you the blind salmon of Assaroe?" "Indeed I am," answered the salmon. "Well, let me tell you why I'm here. I have a young fella who's only fledged from the shell, only came out of the shell a month ago. And last night was the coldest night I ever spent. In my life, I spent the whole night jumping up and down in my nest trying to keep my son and myself warm. And he tells me this morning, and he only a month out of the shell, that there was a night colder than last night. I didn't believe him, and he told me to find the blackbird at the forge, which I did. There she was, perched on an iron rod, and she tells me that when she came, the iron was so many inches, the rod was so many inches long and so many inches wide, and every 7 years she'd rub her beak along that rod. And if she does it one more time, it'll break. That's how long she was there. And she said she never experienced a night as cold as last night. And she sent me to find a certain stag in a certain field, and I did. And he tells me he's been there for thousands of years. Every year he loses his antlers and he uses the antlers to create a fence. And all he needs is 2 more antlers to fall off and he'll complete the fence. And that's how long he's been there. And he says he too has never experienced a night as cold as last night. And he told me to find you and the blind salmon of Assaroe. And you are that salmon. Indeed, I am the blind salmon of Assaroe. She replied, well, let me tell you, there was a night colder than last night. Wad as he wad, sa Chan Hampshire, sa Cheershaw. Long, long ago in ancient times, there was a night. It was so cold, it would cut you in two. The bitterest, coldest night ever, known as Old May Night, the 11th of May. And I was up and down, jumping up and down out of the river. And at one point, I leaped up into the air. And it was so cold, by the time I touched the water again, it was frozen. And I got stuck. I couldn't move. And I tell you, I nearly froze completely that night. And about 2 hours after daybreak, who comes flying along? Only the old hawk of Achill himself. And he flies down and he starts picking away at the ice. He makes a little hole, sticks his beak in and plucks out my eye and eats it. And that is why I've had only one eye ever since. And that is why I'm now known as the blind salmon of Assaroe. And let me tell you, as sure as I'm here and as sure as you're there, that is no fledgling of yours that was in that nest. That was the old hawk of Achill himself. And the mother eagle said, how can you say that? Well, sure, how could he have known about Old May Night, the 11th of May? That was the old hawk of Achill. Well, the mother eagle flew into a huge rage. She could hardly thank the blind salmon of Assaroe, and off she flew like the clappers until she arrived at her nest. And there it was empty. No sign of her fledgling, her young one. No sign of the hawk of Achill, which was, for had he been there, there's no doubt, she would have made sure he had met his end. And that is the end of my story. Now, you make of that story what you will. Sinead. So, it's a fairly grim story, but I hope you enjoyed it. And I wish you, I usually say good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're listening to a recording, but this is a recording of this chat. So I look forward to seeing you next week. I will have a live chat where I am talking with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So I wish you a pleasant week. Be well, enjoy the wildness and hopefully the warmth of Bealtaine with all that's happening in the landscape and all the vitality and the virility and the fertility and the greenness and the wonderful perfumes. Well, Bealtaine for us in Ireland is the start of summer. I assume some parts of the world may not be feeling the warmth yet, but wishing you warmth in your hearts, warmth in your lives until we meet again next week. Slán go fóill.